What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Detroit Lions related. That includes news, updates, and what we're going to be doing today, which is some in-depth analysis of the Washington Commanders, who will be the Lions' opponent in the divisional round of this year's playoffs. Morgan, we're recording this on a Wednesday night. We're still a few days out from this game actually taking place. And I'm starting to just wish it was tomorrow. Like, this is taking a little too long. I just want to see this team get back to business. And it's not, again, in any type of way of feeling like overly confident in their ability to just walk past, Washington, but it feels like it's been too long since we last seen this team play football.
Yeah, no doubt. I feel like I figured that was going to happen. Like once we figured out we were getting the bye and everything like that, and I was like,
Yeah.
we're going to be chomping at the bit by the end of the second week. But yeah, now that we've known for a couple of days now, I think everyone's dove into like what about Washington, like what makes them tick offensively, defensively. Went back and watched the wild card game they had against Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to focus on their offense today. So no shade at the defense or anything like that. I just think that's the biggest talking point with Jayden Daniels making plays back there. Defensively, they've been getting better over the course of the season. DVOA wise, they are 23rd defense in terms of defensive DVOA, 20th in pass, 26th in rushing. So it's just really, that might be a problem against the Lions. We were just talking about it, Miko. So that's something to watch for. And then obviously when the Lions are on the defensive side of the ball, it's all about stopping number 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if you're a Lions fan watching this, the thing that you're most concerned about is, okay, how is this defense going to respond to a quarterback like Jayden Daniels, to an offensive play caller like Cliff Kingsbury? Like, while the last time we saw this Lions defense, they were, containing the Minnesota Vikings to only 9 points, really limiting Justin Jefferson, wrecking havoc on Sam Darnold. We do at least acknowledge that, like, this Commanders offense is a little different. Like, maybe it doesn't have the star-studded wide receiver like Justin Jefferson, but Terry McLaurin is still a threat. And like you said, a lot of what we're going to look at today is very heavily focused on Jayden Daniels and that read option that they run, which is something that the Lions struggled mightily when we saw them have to deal with it against the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. Not saying Jayden Daniels is Josh Allen, but it's just, will we see the Lions learn from some of the mistakes that they made when trying to defend against Josh Allen?
Yeah, no doubt. And I think obviously getting Anzalone back in the fold helps a ton because we were running out there with Jack Campbell, like Ben Neiman and Nowaski out there against Allen. And like you said, Miko, Allen's a different beast at this point in his career. Like he's, a fully fledged monster. And then again, Jayden Daniels is a problem. And they do it, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator in Washington, has done a good job of adapting the scheme to Daniel's skill set. He's more pro ready than a lot of people gave him credit for coming out of LSU. But you can tell he processes well back there, doesn't get too sped up, has been sacked quite a bit. I think you mentioned he was like 6 in terms of taking the most sacks in the NFL with 47.
Yeah.
Fumbled the ball 5 times, thrown 9 interceptions to 25 touchdowns. So the turnovers are there. It's not like he's turning the ball over at a cyclic rate or anything like that. But I think really they're going to talk about it a ton this week. And Dan Campbell already mentioned it earlier in the week, but rushing with discipline and not getting overzealous and jumping out of a lane, because that's when you're giving Washington easy yards. And that's what happened with Tampa Bay, man. Tampa Bay couldn't really get off the field. Washington didn't do anything crazy in terms of like statistical output, 33 carries for like 86 yards total. 33 for 82, excuse me. So wasn't anything crazy, but at the end of the day, they kept converting. They were like 11 of 20 between third down and fourth down conversions. So that's 11 times your drive got extended, right, Miko? So that wears on you.
Yeah, and it also takes away your opportunities to be able to generate any type of momentum for your offense. So that's the threat of Washington Commanders offense. And so let's go ahead and jump into the first play we got here, Morgan. And again, like you said, this is heavily focused on Jayden Daniels and what they like to do with him in some of these read option type of situations.
Yeah, and this is just a scramble. He drops back to pass, and I wanted to highlight this. So it's the first quarter, 9:17 left in the first quarter, so it's still early, but 0. So I think this is Yaya Diaby, who I really like. He's a problem, and part of the reason Tampa Bay did really well against Daniels for the most part. But this is just what I was talking about earlier. So you don't want to do this, right? it's going to be that constricting effect, right? Like you think like of a boa constrictor on the pocket. That's what you want, because you do this, you take an inside move, then you got poor Vita Vea trying to chase
Yeah.
Jayden Daniels, and it's like 8 yards, and he gets out of bounds. You get a little bit of a hit on him, but at the end of the day, these are the cheap yards that I don't want to give Jayden in this offense because I want to make them earn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it comes down to, like you were saying earlier, like what Dan Campbell was talking about, not being like being disciplined in your rush lanes, but also not being selfish in this moment, right? This can't be more about you making a play, which I think is kind of what happens here. Yaya, like you said, Yaya Diaby jumps inside on his pass rush, but at the same time, Vita Vea does the same thing. So like you have two guys that are trying to go into the same gap, and no one's there for outside contain, right? And so it does make for this easy lane for the quarterback to kind of tuck it in, like you said, pick up those 8 yards.
Yeah, and it's early in the contest, so maybe you give Diaby a pass the one time. Like, he probably went over to his position coach and they're like, "Hey, don't do that again. We gotta keep that outside shoulder free." That's what I'd be telling him, at least, because you don't want Daniels to bust a 50-yarder, right? Because that's how if you're the Lions, that's how Washington would stay in this game, is if you're just being you're being undisciplined, and you're trying to make plays. Like, I'm sure Aaron Glenn's telling them, stay within the confines of the scheme and everything is going to be fine, because they have played athletic quarterbacks. They did a good job with Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson outside of the one first series, which, if you've heard me talk about this before, those first series are always a little bit of an outlier to me, because like these guys like Cliff Kingsbury, Ben Johnson, like the elite play callers, the Shanahan system, all those guys, the McVays, those first 15 are probably going to be pretty nice, especially if you got a quarterback that can do some stuff out of the read option, out of any of
Yeah.
that, those concepts. So, see if they're going to break some off here and there, because Jayden Daniels is that type of athlete. But I do think the defense will be able to settle in and hopefully do what Tampa did, because Tampa did a really good job, man. Like, you watch
I
that
think
game
that,
back.
yeah, and that's the thing that you and I talked about coming out of that game, is like it didn't feel like Tampa was ever really out of it until that turnover. And then it was just like you felt everything, shift. I know some people don't necessarily believe in momentum, but like that is when it felt like, okay, things are definitely going more so in the direction of Washington, not just because they're in scoring position, but it's like you needed to hold serve, because the Commanders were doing a really good job of controlling clock and at least moving the football down the field. Like, you and I sat down and looked at some of the drives that they had in their game against the Bucks, and it's like, outside of them not converting a couple fourth downs, like that game could have got ugly for Tampa earlier than it did, if not for Dan Quinn rolling the dice on a couple fourth downs instead of kicking field goals.
Yeah, and Quinn's going to be aggressive, especially I think he's going to go into Detroit knowing that he's probably, most likely going to have to score some points in order to, stay in this game. So, yeah, I think I expect them to be aggressive. And again, they're a really good third down and fourth down team, because you have an athlete like Jayden Daniels at quarterback. It's almost like it's adding an extra element that defenses have to account for. Like, the Lions are obviously very good on those downs
Mm-hmm.
as well, but for different reasons. And some of those have to deal with the running game, and some do have to deal with Goff, like being so good pre-snap and knowing where to go with the ball in the offense. So I think there's something to be said for that too. But yeah, I'm excited to see, because the Lions have the horses. Like, yes, it would be nice to have Hutchinson and Aleem and Carlton and et cetera for this game, but you still have, you have Brian Branch, you have
Yeah.
Anzalone, you have Jack Campbell. Like, you got the athletes to be able to wrangle him in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you have the players to be able to, again, be able to contain a player like that. But like you said, with that very first play that we looked at, it's all about guys being on the same page, understanding their responsibilities, and not getting overzealous when they have an opportunity to make a play, to, again, be locked in on the moment and doing what they're supposed to do. So let's go ahead and jump to the second play here. And yeah, why don't you just kind of walk us through this one?
So a lot of the time I picked up I'm sure AG saw, picked up on this too, because he's a lot smarter than I am in terms of football, right? But they run a lot of these option concepts into the boundary. And what I mean by that is the short side of the field. So you see the ball's on the right hash mark, and they're going to run a speed option with the right guard pulling. He actually gets a really good block on whoever that is there and puts him on his butt. Tampa Bay did a really good job time and time again stringing these out to the sideline and not giving Daniels the ability to like put his foot in the ground and cut up field, because that's what he wants to do. And
Mm-hmm.
this is another really good hit from Zion McCollum, 7 coming downhill. And he gets at first I was like, this is pretty violent here. But at the end of the day, Daniels is making himself a runner, and he's not stepping out of bounds. We were talking about it before we hopped on too, Miko. I know, but it's like he takes a lot of these hits, man, and he's not a huge guy. He's a big guy, but
But
I
he's not.
worry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's not Cam Newton. He's not Anthony Richardson. He's not Josh
Josh
Allen.
Allen, no. These are some big hits too. Like this one looked probably more violent than it was because he was in the air and got spun around or whatever. But yeah, this is something to see. Tendency wise, this is a lot of the time they're running it into the boundary, which that just might be a comfortability thing for Jayden Daniels. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
it's definitely a tell, and you'll see. Like I do think the Lions will start inserting because in these read options, you're going to be reading that defensive end to the play side, right? And
Yeah.
I kept seeing Tampa, they would insert somebody late into the play, and then either Daniels would know to read that guy in terms of keeping the ball or, giving it to the running back. And they made it difficult for him. He had 13 carries for 36 yards. So, and I think they were dang near all of them were earned, right?
Yeah, and I think in situations like that, the way you look at the formation, you look at the down and distance, like they're expecting Jayden Daniels to, I think, to just out athlete all the opposing linebackers that are on the other team. And so, to your point earlier about the Lions having a Jack Campbell and Alex Anzalone, a Brian Branch, you're going to struggle in those types of situations because those are guys that are very good sideline to sideline. And if Fatu Melifonwu, like those are guys to where if you're going to choose to continue to run those types of plays and think that you're just going to get the edge every single time, like you're probably going to struggle quite a bit. I do recall the Lions on a number of situations this season where teams have tried to run to the boundaries out of the field, and it's not even just like the safeties that are making the play. Like these corners get off of blocks really well when you talk about Amik and Terrion. And so while in that situation, again, the Commanders were still able to pick up yards, make it a much more manageable third or even again a fourth down situation that they could have gone for. With the Lions, like you run the risk of those being negative plays if you gamble and you're wrong in those situations. And to your point about Jayden Daniels taking those unnecessary hits, when I saw this happening in the game, the first thing I thought about was the story that Amon Ra told about Caleb Williams. When Dan Campbell turned on the film of Caleb Williams doing very similar things, like not being in a hurry to get out of bounds or making it seem like he's going to go out of bounds and then maybe try to pick up a couple yards. You do that in Detroit, you're going to get hit. Like, and I don't even mean that like on like being dirty or anything like that, but like Dan's going to be telling his players if he's in bounds, hit him.
Yeah, you got to, man, because otherwise you're gonna encourage them to keep doing it. If it works, they're like, oh, okay, we can do this a little more. But I think legally, obviously, and like the same thing happened to Caleb Williams. Jack Campbell hit him hard, man. It looked pretty bad, but it was very legal. Hit him like in the torso. Just not a huge guy, and Jack Campbell's a big guy and he can run. So I think athlete wise that the Lions match up pretty well with Washington, and then their offensive line's been playing okay. They don't really have like a standout. They got the rookie Coleman at left tackle, Tyler, I can never say his last name, Biadasz, the center,
Biadasz?
Biadish, something like that. You know you guys know what I'm
Yeah, the
talking
kid from
about.
Wisconsin. I liked him. I liked him coming out of the draft.
Yeah, he's good, a good player. But yeah, I overall it's not anything crazy. But 5 is the one that's the straw that stirs the drink for sure in Washington.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into the third play we got here. And again, I think it's something very similar again with a lot of the speed option type of stuff that they like to run with Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, and they do interesting wrinkles here, right? They motion Eckler in this case over from the other side of the field into pitch relationship for Daniels. So he's running the option. I think that's with Brian Robinson, if I'm not mistaken. Keeps the ball. And the 27, though, Zion McCollum again. You could tell, watch his tape, was prepared. Todd Bowles' defenses typically are, you know what I mean? Like they come ready to play. We've seen it a couple times as Lions fans. But yeah, this is a perfect play and something. This is what you got to do. You got to keep that outside shoulder free, and then eventually Eckler gets out of pitch relationship with Daniels, and it makes it tough, right? Like there's nowhere to go, and this is a loss. This is on 2nd and 10, so they do in the red zone. This is a great play.
Yeah, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we were looking at the Yaya Diaby play, where we were talking about again knowing your responsibility and not being in a hurry to make a play yourself, but understanding your responsibility. McCollum here has an opportunity to, like, again, leave his assignment and just try to make that play on Jayden Daniels in the backfield. But if he does, Morgan, like, he opens that door up for him to just, for Daniels to basically make a little pop pass over to Eckler, and that's a touchdown.
Yeah, and that's what they wanted too. I think that was, they were trying to put the player that was in motion with Eckler into a stress point, like, see if he makes a wrong decision and see if they can exploit it, and then he played it perfectly. So this is, I hope, BB and Iffy and Kirby and everyone, I trust them. They've been playing well, and you can tell that secondary has been playing together a little bit now, which makes me feel a little bit more warm and fuzzy, if you know what I mean. Like, just with communication and trying to just make sure all their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted in the back end, because you don't want to give them anything cheap. I think you got to make this team earn it all, because I want to feel good about this game, early in the second half, ideally. I'm not really trying to sweat this one out.
No, 100%. The only thing that I will highlight in a play like that, the only thing that would have me concerned, and again, this is a callback to the Buffalo game, is when you see that many read option type of plays and you deal with that much play action, like, you also, as much as we're talking about the secondary managing their responsibilities in these pitch type situations, your linebackers have to be just as disciplined in these types of situations, because like you said, one of the things with read option is that it puts a lot of stress on your entire defense, because you have to be able to play the run and be ready to defend the pass in the event that that's in terms of what it ends up being. And I remember with Buffalo, a lot of that burning the Lions a couple times, because you were getting linebackers, approaching the line of scrimmage and trying to close out on the run, and then turning back and realizing, like, oh, it's a pass, and they're already too far to be able to get any type of depth to be able to cover ground behind them. And so it's something that Aaron Glenn is going to have to stress to his defense of, like, hey, we're going to have to figure out, like, how to be able to play both of these situations to where we're not getting gashed on the run because you guys are too far back, but at the same time, we're not also leaving the door wide open for Jayden Daniels to get easy yards, through the air either.
Yeah, and that's where I trust, BB and Curb to make, that's Kirby's section of the field, really. I think he said that on Kay Adams' show. He's like, that middle of the field's mine. He loves that. So, and I do. I hope having Anzalone back will help with that, just because, like, dealing with this RPO stuff that Washington runs. So if you guys, for those of you that don't know, RPO, run pass option. So that's where you'll see Daniels will be in the mesh point with Robinson or Eckler, whoever's back there. He's keeping it at the mesh point, and then he can either give it to the back, keep it and run, or pull it and then run. Usually they're running like a slant or some sort of in breaker where he can easily see it, and they run that. And that's, like you said, Miko, that's a good point, because you got to be able to, this is why everyone wants a running quarterback though, folks, is because it puts a little extra stress on your defense, just because it's another couple of variables that you have to deal with defensively, that whereas if you didn't have a running quarterback, you weren't preparing for one, you're not really paying that much mind.
Yeah. So it's something to keep in mind when watching this game, like, specifically. It's like a minor detail that, like, I still will be paying close attention to, which is essentially, like, when talking about the linebackers, where does AG want his linebackers? Like, how deep in down the field or near the line of scrimmage does he want them to be able and to be in position to defend this? Because, like I said, if they're too close, you run the risk of them not being able to get enough depth and coverage. But if they're too far back, you also run the risk of them not being close enough to the line of scrimmage to be able to impact the running game either. So it's definitely, like, a minor detail to kind of keep an eye on.
For sure.
All right. Going into the fourth play here. Again, a lot of the same type of stuff with Jayden Daniels, but again, this is another good example of what we were talking about, where you don't, you're not keeping good, sound gap integrity. You're not, doing your job at the best ability, and you kind of leave the door open for Daniels to make a play.
Yeah, and it sucks because it was played so well play side, right? So if you watch Yaya Diaby, opposite of where I have Joe Tryon Shoyinka circled, Diaby does a great job. So he's surfing, which is like, if you see the position he gets in, he's kind of, he's staying in between. He's squeezing that gap down to where the back can't get through. But then at the same time, he's keeping his left shoulder unoccupied, so he can hem Jayden Daniels back in if he does keep it. And then Daniels keeps it. But then if you watch on the backside, Joe Tryon Shoyinka, number 9 for Tampa Bay, the one who I have circled at the beginning of the play, for whatever reason, man, gets a little overzealous, tries to jump inside with Vita Vea, and then it's just like just a couple free cheap yards, you had it hemmed up. Should have been a TFL, to be honest with you. If
Mhm.
everyone stayed home, I think you'd had a TFL instead. It was 1st and 10, so probably like 2nd and 5 there. I believe it was a 5-yard game.
Yeah, and it's like you said though, it's the difference between having the team possibly behind the sticks and something like this where again they're ahead and they now second down becomes much more manageable and it puts them in a position to get a third down that's much more manageable. These are the little types of things that again can start to just like pick at a defense, and it's all off of just again not holding good integrity to that outside contain.
Yeah, just don't get greedy, man. Even though, and it ideally, Tryon Shoyinka is used to being able, like, okay, if there's a normal person going over there, I can go over there. I don't have to keep perfect gap discipline. But against an athlete like Daniels, you do, man. You got to almost treat this like you're, playing like a baby Lamar. Don't give him a crease because he's going to take that thing and expose it. So
Hmm.
yeah, got to be disciplined. No cheap
And it
stuff.
doesn't and it doesn't help, right? That number 98 is also getting washed out the play, so it's like you
Yeah.
you also don't have help there. So it's again, you leave it's not just you missed your assignment, you also open up the door for other players to have to try to cover for you, and that makes it much more difficult on your defense as well. And that's something that Dan and AG have talked about in the past of like, hey, making sure that you're doing your job not just for the betterment of you, but for the guy that's playing next to you. Because if they're going to do what they're supposed to do and you're not, you leave them high and dry in that situation.
Yeah, and that's a good point too about 98 because he was like getting his butt whooped. That was
And
a
there's no
tough
guarantee,
rep.
like, and I was gonna say, like, there's no guarantee, like, as much faith as you may have in your teammate, like, oh no, he's gonna be there. Like, hey, people lose reps all the time, man.
Yeah, that was tough. And then it's exacerbated by, what Tryon Shoyinka did. I just like saying his name. But yeah, I can't do that. I'm hoping that Terrell Williams will have these guys ready to play. You know what I mean? Like, gotta be sound.
Yeah. And so I know we spent a lot of time talking about a lot of run pass option, a lot of Jayden Daniels making plays with his legs. We can't forget the fact that Morgan, he is still a very talented thrower of the football, right? Single digit interceptions this season as a rookie. But if you give him the opportunity to rip it and make plays in the air, he can do that as well.
Yeah, and I love this throw because it's 3:20 left in the game. It's 3rd and 6. So really you get a first down here. You're close to being able to put this one away because Tampa Bay could only stop the clock, I think, 2 more times with the timeout and the 2-minute warning. But you could tell as soon as he got into his drop, he knew where he wanted to go with this, hits his back foot, and just lets it rip. And he's pretty unflappable in the pocket. I give him that. Watching the tape, he's not really bothered if a guard or a center is getting walked back into his lap. He knows he's a good enough athlete to make something happen if he needs to. But at the same time, like you said, he's good sitting back there and just going through his progressions and letting one rip when he needs to. So this is a big time throw and a big time moment. And I was like, okay, he'll do it. They don't take a ton of shots because, like you said, it is, they want to have long sustained drives, particularly against a team like the Lions, just to keep that offense off the field. But yeah, this is a big boy throw.
Yeah. And the one thing I wanted to point out and the reason I paused it here is again, this is where that effect of Jayden Daniels and RPO and just his ability to run the football puts a lot of stress on your defense because again, this is clearly a pass. There's not even any play action here, but your linebackers still are not getting depth at all, right? In any kind of way of trying to take away any type of throwing window because why? This is still an opportunity for Jayden Daniels to run this if he sees too much open grass. So you still are trying to keep your linebackers, whether you want to call it a spy, whether you just want to say it's a shallow zone, like it opens up all of this additional green grass behind them. And this route is ran a lot deeper, Morgan, than probably it needed to be to pick up this first down, but it's helped out a ton by the fact that these linebackers aren't getting depth.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is where a lot of fans will be like, the Lions need to spy Jayden Daniels or whatever running quarterback that the Lions have played over the last couple years. This is where I'm like, guys, it's in here and there. Yes, I do think it's an option, but right here, right, you have 98 and 45 sitting there, really not doing much except staring at Daniels. So 2 out of your 11 defenders are really just rendered useless. They're just standing here looking at a guy. At the end of the day, do you think either of those cats are going to make an open field tackle on someone like Jayden Daniels? You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm like, guys, the spy thing isn't. I don't know. It's not really viable most of the time unless you're using a Brian Branch or an Ifatu Melifonwu. But if you're sitting back there, like I love Jack Campbell, he's a really good athlete, one of the best, most athletic linebackers to come out in a long, long time. If you look at Raz, shout out Kent Lee Platt. But at the end of the day, is he going to make a tackle on Jayden Daniels in the open field? Probably not. Probably
Well,
not.
especially on a route like that, right? When we're talking about an in-breaking route in the middle of the field where you don't have, like, yes, you have coverage on the back end, like, right? They clearly had their safeties covering deep, but again, you run a route that's just shy of where the safeties are going to be. And again, if your receiver is good enough to get inside leverage on a receiver on the corner, that's easy pitch and catch, especially if there's no pressure on the quarterback, right? And so I understand why you would call a defense like that. You're expecting your defensive line to get pressure. You're expecting your corner to make a route like that more difficult. But when those things fail, and then you couple it with the fact that your linebackers are spying and therefore not able to impede the passing play in any way. Like you said, you have two guys that are basically not involved in the play really at all. Jayden Daniels is basically out there playing 7-on-7 at that point.
Yeah, exactly, Miko. You make it easy because think about it like this, guys. If your linebackers have more depth, that's when you're forcing quarterbacks to layer throws. Like when you hear football people talk about layering throws, what they mean is like typically is over the head of the linebacker and in front of the safeties or in front of the DB, where it's like it's a beautiful throw. Like it's one of my favorite things to watch, like both on broadcast and all 22, because it takes a lot of skill. But if your linebackers have no depth, to your point, bro, like it's an easy one, and Jayden Daniels can just rip that thing. You don't even got to worry about layering it. You know what I mean? Like, let me go ahead and just put some mustard on this thing and get it to where it needs to go. And I do think I think they're going to just focus on that containment. You know what I mean? I think there's going to be places here and there where they blitz BB or Iffy or whomever with the intent to push Daniels to the left side because we've all seen the statistics about him rolling right. He wants to do it. He's comfortable doing that. But ideally, you negate that, in my opinion, and try to, when he does break the pocket, push him left. And whether it's bringing pressure from that right side and designing it, that way and like away from the boundary side of the field, there's a bunch of ways you can attack this. And this is where I trust Aaron Glenn to come up with a good plan, man, because at the end of the day, he hasn't really let us down. Like the Josh Allen thing was an anomaly to me. That was just not a good game to not have Anzalone. And then we got mutant Josh Allen that day. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And I think like that's why I agree with what you were saying about, again, trying to push him left. Like we saw it time and time again watching that game against Tampa. He wants to go right. He enjoys going right. He can run and throw when going right. And this is something that most quarterbacks struggle with. Like I don't want to make it seem like this is just unique to Jayden Daniels. Like quarterbacks that have a dominant hand, which again, Jayden Daniels is right-handed. So of course, anything going to the right is going to be more comfortable. The only way you get to knock him off his square and make these things more difficult is you force him left. And now he has to make decisions, right? Like, am I going to try to throw this rolling left, which is now a much more difficult throw in trying to throw left? Or do I make the boneheaded decision, which is, again, if you're the Commanders, the thing that you don't want him doing is rolling left and trying to throw right, because that's when interceptions and mistakes can happen. Obviously, he can still run, but it just seems like that's not a comfortable motion for him. And again, I don't mean to say like that's unique to Jayden Daniels. I think we see the same thing with Jared Goff, right? When he gets forced to have to go left, it just doesn't look as pretty as when he gets to roll right.
Yeah, just a more natural motion. I do think quarterbacks are getting better and better, and it's something Daniels will probably develop as he goes on. Like you see, like the Mahomes, Josh Allen, they do stuff. You're like, that's kind of against the cardinal rules of quarterbacking, if you will. Like throwing across your body, throwing across the field against the grain of the defense. But man, I would love if Jayden threw a couple of those against the grain against the Lions, because I do like the Lions got some ball hawks back there, man. If you're a Washington fan, I think you guys have had a great season. Definitely, I think your win total from Vegas at the beginning of the year was like 6.5, 7. So you smashed that thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be Washington and Philly moving forward. And really, you get, my gosh, if you get Daniels like another one to go along with Terry and improve this line a little bit, will you be cooking with some hot oil? So still giving the respect this time. It's any given Sunday. I do think if the Lions don't come ready to play, any game's losable. It's the NFL. But at the end of the day, I do think if they're able to do what Tampa did at the minimum to Jayden Daniels, I think they'll be in good shape.
And I think that's where I kind of lean as well, right? I think the Lions have just enough defensively to do a lot of the same things Tampa was able to do defensively. The difference will be is what the Lions are able to do offensively, which is, again, it's very, very odd that as explosive as Tampa's offense looked at times with both Mike Evans and Bucky Irving, that they were only able to put up 20 points. And a lot of that goes to, again, not being effective in the red zone. You have a turnover. You have just, again, not the same type of conversion, or at least, actually, they converted well on third down, but you don't have those sustained drives like Washington did. Those are things that I think the Lions are going to be able to do more so in spades when you look at the fact of having Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're going to have Knuckles and Sonic in the backfield. We don't know how much David Montgomery is going to play, but you at least have both backs available to you. The ability to have extended drives, or again, to strike quickly, is something that Detroit's going to be able to do when you look at the weapons they have available to them. So I think that's where things start to tilt a little bit more so in Detroit's favor. Is not only do they have the ability to make those big plays, they're also going to take a lot more of them than I think Tampa was willing to do in that game. So a lot of things to really look forward to. Like I said, we spent a lot of time talking about Jayden Daniels. That's, again, no shot to the rest of the players on their offense. I think Scary Terry is the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL. De'Ami Brown is coming off a really good performance in that last game. Zach Ertz is seeming to have like a little bit of a resurgence in his career in Washington. So like there's a number of things that Detroit have to worry about alongside Jayden Daniels. But like Morgan said, it starts with number 5.
Yeah, and it always will. That's why we focused on this. We try to make these more of a focus segment, where we're, honing in on one aspect of the team. And right now, I do think the rest of the team is being buoyed by a pretty incredible rookie performance from Daniels. And if you're a Washington fan, you got to be excited moving forward, man. Like, that's why I'm a little bit, obviously it's great being a Lions fan right now, 15-2, 1 seed, all that. But it does feel like, they're just playing with, like they've said, I've seen it a lot on Twitter and everything. They're just playing with house money and they're excited. So that's a good feeling. Excited for the game. Saturday can't get here soon enough. Let's go.
Can't wait for it. So that's pretty much going to do it for us, guys. If you were looking for more additional Lions coverage, any more additional insight into this game or what's going on with the Lions leading up to this game, you guys can always head over to prideofdetroit.com. There are new articles being uploaded there all the time. You can also subscribe to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel and hit that notification bell, because that's going to keep you notified when we do things like go live or upload new videos over here on YouTube. So again, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That's going to keep you locked into everything we're doing. I believe Eric and Jeremy did a mailbag today. So again,
check that out for sure.
To get notified when they do a live mailbag. And again, if you have man, what is our like premium subscription?
POD Direct. Yeah.
If you got POD Direct, you can get even more access to even more live content that, again, is streamed over here on YouTube as well. So it's a lot of things that you can definitely get when you're subscribed to the POD channel. So like I said, check out the website, stay locked in over here on YouTube as well. And we will be back to bring you guys more additional Lions content, hopefully on a win either Sunday or Monday. We'll see when.
Yep.
But with that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.